Let's talk today about 3 mistakes to avoid in your bike training when you're training for Ironman or 70.3 triathlon. The first one I want you to think about is your choice of bike. The mistake I want you to avoid is training on the incorrect bike. So I often get a question from people, which is, should I be training on my road bike? Should I be training on my TT bike? Is it okay to go out on a gravel bike, on a mountain bike, on a hybrid? Which of these is okay? What should I do? And here's my advice to you. You want to be training for the majority of your time on the bike that you're going to be racing on. So if your only choice is a road bike and you're riding that in your race that's coming up in whenever it is, train on that bike in that position. There's a lot of things you can do to help make that bike better for race day. You can get aero bars to put on it to help you get in an aero position. But if that's the only bike that you've got, you don't have any choices, and that makes things easy in a way. I would advise those people to get aero bars and then learn to train in that position. So you learn to ride in that position. It's no good putting aero bars on the day before your big race. You have to have trained in it because your body is only going to adapt and be able to put power out in the position that you've trained in it. So for those people with just a road bike, easy choice. If you've got a time trial bike and a road bike, my advice is going to be that for the vast majority of courses, you're going to be faster, all things being equal, on the time trial bike or the tri bike rather than your road bike. The question then comes about, when should you make the shift from training mainly on the road bike to training on the TT bike or the tri bike? The answer to that is the more time you can spend training on the tri bike position, the more comfortable, the faster, the more powerful you're going to be come race day. That's not to say it's always possible to train on your tri bike. There's going to be some situations where you just don't feel safe, the roads aren't suitable, things like that. But all things being equal, again, the more time you can spend riding on the tri bike in your tri bike position, the faster, the more comfortable, the more powerful you're going to be come race day. And then the third classification here is people who are asking about, well, I've bought a gravel bike, I've got a mountain bike. Can I use these bikes? I want to change up the position. I want to go and ride in different places and I want a bit of variety. And and that's okay. I completely understand the need for people, especially if they've been in the sport for several seasons, wanting a bit of a change and variety. But know that that comes at a cost. We're never going to say to you that you can't do something, but we can give you advice and we can give you evidence that there's a better way and a more optimal way to do things. And so, what I would say is that the gravel bike is fine for that variety. But again, the closer you get to race day, the more you want to be riding on the bike that you're going to be racing on in the position that you're going to be racing in. So, a couple of the drawbacks that we see with people who have gravel bikes, it tends to be that they get themselves obviously off road as much as they can. They go and do something a bit more adventurous. And the thing I'm concerned about from a coaching point of view is people picking up injuries. So it might be that you slide off in the mud. It might be that you slide off on the gravel. And anyone with a gravel bike knows that this happens. But the risk of injury that happens from that can range from no injury at all. It could be skinned hands and knees, or it can be a broken collarbone. And that's the kind of thing that's totally going to derail your season. And again, there's these trade-offs. It's the weighing up and deciding whether or not the risk of something like that happening, how small or big the risk is, against how catastrophic that accident is if it happens. That's the thing you've got to be careful about, and you've got to weigh that up for yourself. Same with mountain biking. If you're the kind of mountain biker who rides steep off-road trails, you've got to be aware of the risk of illness and injury. um, Sometimes we get questions from beginners who say, like, I've only got this one bike at the moment. It's an old mountain bike or it's a hybrid bike. Should I be getting myself a better bike? And which bike should I get? And the answer there is honestly, it doesn't really matter which road bike you choose to get. As long as you get a road bike that fits you and that you can then go and train on, don't get caught up in overthinking of all the different bikes that there are possibly out there. Just get yourself a road bike and transition to training on that road bike. And if in the future you end up buying a tri bike as well, well, that's all well and good, but put that thought down there in the future. For now, just being on the road bike and getting the right training done in the right way on the road bike is going to be tons better than being on a hybrid or on a mountain bike. Okay. Let's go over to the second mistake that we see people making in their bike training. The second, and honestly, I think this is one of the biggest fall downs of athletes who have got some experience and have maybe done one or two races before. The second biggest mistake I see people making is not accurately knowing what their FTP numbers are outdoors relative to indoors. And so most people will have spent their entire winter training indoors, maybe on a turbo trainer or a smart trainer, and they'll know what their FTP numbers are indoors. And then they'll transition to riding outdoors and they'll just move that number across to the outdoor bike. It might even be in lots of cases, people are not riding the same bike, it's not the same power meter, but they're assuming that the number is going to be the same. And in almost all cases, the number is not the same. Most people's FTP, even if you're transferring the same bike and power meter from indoors to outdoors, most people's FTP is different by up to about 10%. And here's the thing, it can be in one direction or the other. So I can't say to you, most people's FTP tends to be read higher outdoors or read higher indoors. It's different for everybody. So you need to do an outdoor FTP test. And I'll advise people to do this at the start of their outdoor riding season. Ideally, this is going to be 12, 16 weeks before your big A race of the year, or it's going to be whenever it becomes safe in the springtime to start riding outdoors. When you've got the opportunity, get yourself outdoors and get an outdoor FTP test done. Then you know what your FTP values are outdoors. And if it's the same as indoors, which happens in a small number of people, great. You don't need to make any adjustments. But I've seen cases where there's been a 40-watt difference between an indoor and an outdoor reading. And obviously, if that can represent 10, 15% of somebody's FTP, that's going to massively skew the numbers. So it isn't as simple as just saying, I did a test indoors on a watt bike, so I'll transfer that to my time trial bike with a pair of power meter pedals on. The numbers are very, very likely going to be different. And if they're not accurate, that whole line about bad data is worse than no data, I think it absolutely underlines it here. Because if you go and ride in an Ironman and you ride, let's say 65% of your FTP, but the FTP is inaccurate by 15%, well, you could have been riding 50% or you could have been riding 80% of FTP. And it never leads to a good outcome for that athlete in the marathon when they get to it. So very simply, get yourself outdoors, do the FTP test outdoors. You can do it on your own or you can enter a time trial, but make sure that it's a safe place to go and do the outdoor FTP test. And then for those of you who use Training Peaks, you are going to have to change your number if you move from riding indoors to outdoors. If you're doing an indoor session, you'll have to change the FTP number in Training Peaks. If you then move to the outdoor session, you'll have to choose the outdoor FTP number in Training Peaks before you go. If you've got a Garmin or a similar head unit, well, the good news there is you can set up different profiles. You can have an indoor profile set up with an indoor FTP. You have the outdoor profile set up with the outdoor FTP, and it'll have you riding to the right percentages. But the most important thing is that you know what that number is as you're riding outdoors and you're comfortable with it. So you don't have to be doing any maths when you're on the fly. Okay. And the third big mistake that we see people making with their bike training is in the fueling of the long rides that they go out and do, both in terms of fueling before the ride, fueling during the ride, and fueling after the ride. It's a question that comes up all the time, and people say, how much energy should I be consuming during a ride? How much should I be having at breakfast? So we've got some guidelines here for you. First up, the actual during the ride fueling itself. Athletes are going to be needing to consume between 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour while you're out riding. Smaller athletes, less than that. Bigger, more powerful athletes, more than that. Obviously, the more power you're putting out, the more you're going to have to fuel it. So you need to experiment with this in training. You will also have to build up to that level as well. So the last thing I want you to do is hear me say this and immediately go out and try and have 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. You're going to have to work your way up towards this. But simply start by recording just what you ate and drank during a ride on your next ride. Work out afterwards what the average is out to over the amount of time you're out, and gradually start to see if you can increase that number a little bit. Because come Ironman race day, the success of your marathon is largely going to be down to how well you manage to fuel on the bike and making sure you get the right levels of fuel in there. So, top tip for you here, you can go over to the Precision Fuel and Hydration website. They've got a really great online planning tool that helps you deal with carbohydrate numbers as well as electrolytes and fluid as well. Makes it really easy to understand. It's a really great educational website, but it'll help you work out some base numbers to work from, and then once you start tracking it, you can track how you feel at different amounts of carbohydrate per hour. And hopefully you'll see a significant improvement there. So there's our answer for how many grams of carbs we want you having when you're actually out on the bike, between 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour on the bike. And then another question we get is, what should you be having before the ride, before you go out? So I'll say it's really great before your long ride to practice fueling the same way that you're going to come race day. So that means having something that's going to be relatively simple for you to prepare on race day morning, not too big, not too small, avoiding having really high fat. You want to be avoiding basically anything that isn't simple and easy to digest, and avoiding high fiber. So our favorite go-to here is porridge. White bread works really well in the form of toast and jam, the really simple stuff, but it's great at getting carbohydrate into your system, but also in a way that isn't loading in loads of fats and isn't loading in loads of fiber as well. That's going to really help you. So again, 100 to 200 grams worth of carbs in porridge is a great pre-ride breakfast in the morning before you go out. And you can replicate that really easy in a race day hotel. If you've just got some milk and you've got the packet mix with you in the hotel room, most places can make that porridge for you. And it becomes a really easy and simple breakfast for you to have. And then the last part of this is the post-ride fueling. And a lot of people overlook this, but it can make a massive difference to how well you recover from the ride, how well you recover from the session, and how well fueled you are for either another session that day or the sessions the next day. So a really good rule of thumb here is to have some carbs when you come in and have something with some protein in. We recommend 20 to 30 grams of protein and 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate as you come in through the door. So really simple, a whey protein shake. That's a really great way that you can get that protein in there. It doesn't tend to have very much, if any, carbohydrate in there. So supplementing that with a couple of slices of toast with banana and honey on, or supplementing it with banana, really good way to get those carbs in as well. If you're really struggling for time, it's a really simple hack, but having some chocolate milk in the fridge has got both the carbs and the protein in there for you. Now, I wouldn't advise you have that after every ride, but it's great to have in the fridge because you've got about a 20-minute fueling window when you get back in from the ride and you finish training. That's the optimal time to get the nutrients and the carbohydrate in there. And if you've got to spend time sort of preparing the food when you get in, it's eating into that window. So having the chocolate milk in the fridge is a really simple way of doing it. And now some of my athletes pre-prepare their whey protein shake before they go. They've got the carbohydrate there in the form of the banana. That's really easy to have. It doesn't take more than 30 seconds to make some toast. But having a little bit of a plan and then getting into the routine of doing it immediately as you get in through the door, this is before you even go for a shower, can really make a difference to how quickly your body refuels and how ready you feel for training later that day or later on in the week. Okay, I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. To wrap things up, here are some discount codes and deals for you. At precisionfuelandhydration.com, you can use the code OXYGEN24 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. You can also use their free fuel and hydration planning tool to receive a personalized strategy for your next race. Their planner will help you understand your own carbohydrate, electrolyte, and fluid needs so you can refine your strategy during training. And don't forget, you can even book a free one-to-one video consultation with PF&H's athlete support team, and they'll be happy to help you nail your race nutrition plan, and it'll help you perform at your best on race day. And also, over at teamoxygenaddict.com, we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers. You can check out the details of our coaching on our website. And if it sounds good, please book a call with us and see if you'd be a good fit for joining the team. Let's see how we can best help you achieve your triathlon goals for the coming season. So remember, there's links in the show notes. You don't have to remember them. Until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast.